Hello my fellow heeheemae! Today's video will be covering mistakes that I have made so that you can potentially learn from them and not have to go through the same thing that I did. And basically, these are things that I wish I knew before starting my plant journey. A lot of these topics kind of bleed into each other, but I wanted to kind of break it down into topics so that way it's a little bit more structured. In one of my previous videos, I stated that moss has nutrients in it for your plants, but that is actually false. Moss is my favorite substrate to propagate plants. It is a really great amendment to add to your soil or to use on its own. I really enjoy how low maintenance moss prop boxes are. And you've seen in my other videos, I've made many prop boxes, and it's a low maintenance way to boost the humidity for your plants as long as you keep the lid on your clear bins. And it helps to have clear lids, that way your plants can get more sunlight all around. Another thing also involving moss are moss poles, and I obviously had a fail moment with moss poles. The thing I used to wrap the moss was actually just plastic, and I was supposed to get wire mesh. So there was supposed to be metal in between the plastic or PVC, and that way it could stay stiff and upright. But obviously if it's just plastic, it's going to get flimsy, especially the taller and taller you make the pole. So please learn from my mistake. Don't use 100% plastic to create your moss poles because it definitely will not stand upright if you do. Read the description of what you're buying. Make sure it's a wire, metal, grid kind of material. The next topic is along the same vein. It is about PVC pipes. So PVC pipes are not necessary as long as you have the metal wire that I was discussing in the previous topic. PVC pipes can actually get in the way of your roots being able to grow into the moss pole because the roots won't have as much space in the pole itself if the PVC pipe is in the way. I do see the benefit in self-watering moss poles. My next project personally is a moss pole without a PVC pipe, and I want to experiment and see how my plants do and if the roots can take into the moss pole and climb up and be healthier. So yeah, that's kind of my current stance on moss poles. Let me know if you think differently down below. Also, I wanted to add that if your PVC pipe is really thick and tall, most likely it will not work with a pot that is 12 inches or smaller. For reference, I bought PVC pipes that were 5 feet tall and 1¼ inch diameter, and it was very thick. Not just in diameter, but just the thickness of the PVC itself. It made it so that my 10-inch terracotta pot would topple over if I tried to put it in there, and it just was not stable. Keep that in mind if you're trying to get a PVC pipe. Get something smaller in diameter and lighter if you can, especially if you're getting something as tall as like a 5-foot pipe. The next topic is going to be about repotting. I was the type to bring a plant home and I wanted to repot it immediately because I always thought that the soil that the plant came in was not good and I wanted to add all of my amendments and everything. But if you think about it, when you bring a plant into your home, it still has to acclimate. It's stress from the point that you transported it from the nursery, or if you got it online, it's stressed from the shipping and it still has to acclimate to your home. So if you repot it so soon, the plant will be in even more shock. Definitely try to wait a few weeks before repotting. This is something I had to learn the hard way because some of my plants definitely got stressed out from me repotting it too soon. I think being a good plant parent is minimizing the amount of stress that you put your plant through. Do everything you can to give the plant the best life that it could have. So just put off the repotting a little bit, maybe let the roots get a little bit more established. Then you can repot with all of your amazing amendments. Another thing about repotting is you should make sure that your plant is actually root bound before repotting, if possible. Unless it's some kind of emergency and it's like a pest problem or something, then definitely repot it if you think that's the best solution. The next topic I wanted to discuss is propagation. When I was a new plant parent, I would want to propagate all my plants and make more babies, possibly make a fuller plant, you know, add the propagations back into the mother plant and all that good stuff. Pruning your plant can actually be beneficial and it stimulates new growth in your plant. On the other hand, if you cut your plant back too much, it can be detrimental to the plant because it may shock the plant and it is worried about losing too many leaves. I believe the rule of thumb is do not cut your plant back more than half. If you're thinking about taking a lot of cuttings, stop at the halfway point. And definitely just do your research about each plant that you bring into your home, how to propagate it, all that good stuff. Next up, we are talking about pot size. One thing I want you to take away from this topic and this video is please opt for a smaller pot. When in doubt, do not give your plant too big of a pot. The reason for this is if you have a really large pot and you have a plant with just a little bit of roots, when you water the plant can only soak up so much water, especially when the roots are not established and they're still growing. The rest of the water will get stuck in the soil and the soil is going to stay damp and soggy for way longer because there aren't enough roots to soak up the water. This could easily result in overwatering and then it may cause root rot and leaf drop and your plant may end up dying. Pot size is very, very important. Also, if the soil is damp for way too long, it really attracts fungus gnats. Fungus gnats can hang out on the top of the soil, it can hang out at the bottom, it can like lay its eggs in the soil and they'll just keep flying around in your face and it's really annoying. So please avoid too big of a pot when you're picking out a pot for your plant. Your plant will definitely be happier in a smaller pot as long as the roots can fit in there with a little bit of room to grow. A slightly smaller pot size is a better situation for your plant because you can always repot it if it gets root bound pretty quickly and you can just up pot it the next season or next month rather than giving your plant way too big of a pot and it ends up getting root rot and losing a lot of leaves is not a pretty picture. It's really not worth it to risk your plant's health or dealing with all of the negative effects that I mentioned earlier. The last topic is an all-encompassing water, light, and humidity. I clumped this one all together because honestly, it's all about trial and error. You can do all the research in the world, you can Google the specific plant, you can watch all the YouTube videos on that plant, but what it comes down to is bringing your plant home, putting it in a spot that you think would be good for it, and just keeping an eye on it. See if the leaves burn, see if the soil dries out way too quickly, check to see if it wilts very fast. So if the leaves burn, that means there's too much light. If it dries out too quickly, that may be that it's root bound or it's getting a little too much sunlight, but that's also okay in a way. Wilting, that could mean that it's being overwatered. So honestly, there's a lot that goes into it, finding a good spot for your plant. So when you're seeking advice and you're researching on a plant, the people giving advice may have a different environment than you. They might blast the AC or heater, they might have higher or lower humidity levels, they may have more or less light in their home. So definitely just play around with it, see where your plant is the happiest in your home, because everyone's home environment environment is slightly different. Researching your plant can definitely give you a ballpark of a plant's specific water, soil, light, and humidity needs, but you still need to figure out where in your home your plant will live its best life. Also, how much you water your plant is dependent on where you put it, how much light it gets, how much humidity it gets, all that good stuff. And the pot size, that really matters too. So use a moisture meter if you need to. Pick up your plant, feel the soil, dig your finger as deep as you can, or pick up the pot, look at the bottom where the drainage holes are, maybe poke your pinky finger in there and see if it's still wet, and depending on the plant, water it if needed. So that's a tip for you. I feel like not a lot of people will give advice to pick up your plant and like stick your finger at the bottom, but honestly that's how I do it. If it's a philodendron or pothos, something like that, that needs to dry out completely before you need to water it again, I just try to stick my finger into the bottom to see if it's completely dry, and that method works for me personally. So I encourage you guys to try it out. It's all about trial and error. Just do what works for you. One solid advice that I will give is to know what kind of plant you have, so that way you know what kind of soil to use when you repot. For example, you should know if your plant is a cactus or succulent, because it will need cactus and succulent soil, which I did not know that one of my plants was a succulent, or maybe I kind of did, but I for some reason still put it in general potting mix, and that plant did not do well. Just learn from my mistakes. Make sure you know if your plant is a tropical one or a cactus or succulent or an orchid or whatever other kind of plant there is, and use the appropriate soil for that plant. So that is gonna be about it for this video. I'm definitely still learning. I am still going through it with some of my plants on this plant journey. Try your best not to give up on your plants. Give them some tender loving care and treat them as best you can, because they are living things. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye!